All right, we're so excited about our services on Sunday. This coming Sunday, June the 21st, in our 10:15 a.m. service, our 6 p.m. service, and then our services going forward. We're going to be moving back into our building. We've been looking forward to this time, and we're excited about it. I want to give just a few guidelines and some suggestions for you as we look forward to that. And here at the main entrance, this is where everyone will need to enter for the services on Sunday morning. And we're going to be careful on Sunday morning to open the doors 15 minutes before the service begins. So that will be at 10 o'clock. The doors will open. We encourage you to come and to be prepared to be ready to seat yourself in the auditorium. We'll have a couple of ushers on hand as well to give some guidance and some help with that. As we think about getting back to the building, then we're also going to be reminding you that the doors to the entry at the entry time, and as well as the exiting of the building, are going to be left open, even though it's going to be pretty warm. We're going to leave those open so that nobody needs to handle those doors. We'll be doing that for at least the first couple of weeks, and we'll not be having our ushers shake hands, etc. They'll be here to greet and to help, but not necessarily to shake hands. Many of you have been asking about the wearing of masks, and with Lehigh County still in the yellow zone that the governor has set aside, we are going to be asking folks to wear a mask during the time that they are in the building. Let me give you some guidelines for that. You need to be careful with that mask to, of course, follow the state guidelines, but for those who are under the age of 12, a mask will not be necessary. We'll also be turning the air conditioning down a couple of degrees. The thermostats will be turned down to help with the temperature control, because when you have a mask on, it feels much hotter. And so for some of you who are wired a little bit more liking the hot weather, you may want to bring a coat or a sweater to cover up a little bit, just in case you get a little bit cool. We're hoping that we don't have to keep that in place for very long. And Lord willing, once we get to the place where Lehigh County goes to green under the governor's plan, we will make masks optional. We realize that some of you may not be able to do that, and so we would suggest that leading up to that time, or waiting until Lehigh County goes green, that you would either use the live stream or some of the other options, which we'll mention a little bit later, rather than coming into the building. But we do respectfully request that everyone would wear a mask, at least for these first couple of weeks. As you make your way into the auditorium for the service on Sunday, we're going to have every other row blocked off to aid with the social distancing, and we're going to try to maintain that. For your point of reference, within an aisle, 3 chairs would be the equivalent of what the state is recommending for social distancing. So if you got in one of the longer rows and there was another family in that row, you should try to leave 3 chairs between your 2 families. It would be helpful if there are some folks, for instance, your extended family, that you are already in contact with and spending time with. You may want to organize yourselves outside before you enter, and then come in the building and be seated in the same row. That would minimize the number of chairs within rows that we have to give up to maintain the social distancing. So you can organize that on your own. Also, in the service, we're not going to have a meet and greet time. We're not going to be handshaking. I know some folks have said, hey, you know what, no problem, I like shaking hands. We are going to just respectfully ask you not to shake hands for this period of time. We look forward to getting back to that meeting and greeting and being able to shake hands, but it makes some folks nervous, and if you stick out a hand to ask them to shake, they may feel ashamed that they're not returning that, and that puts a lot of pressure on folks who may have a different way of looking at things. So for now, we're asking that we not shake hands. We're also going to be streamlining the services in here to minimize the amount of time that we're in the auditorium. We're going to be shortening the song service a little bit. We're going to be keeping the sermon on the shorter side, so that we're in the auditorium within the enclosed space for the minimum amount of time. Our offering is going to be using the offering drop box. We have one here at the back of the auditorium, and we'll also have one out at the main exit and entrance to the church building where an usher will be standing. You can use either of those. You can also give digitally online. We're not going to be using hymnals. We'll be removing all the hymnals and the pew Bibles, and we'll just be using the overheads for a couple of weeks. I know many of you like to use the hymnals. We'll look forward to returning those to the racks. But for now, we're going to minimize the number of surfaces that have to be disinfected and cleaned between every service. So once the auditorium is full, and using social distancing and the guidelines that the governor has given to us, we can fit right at 250 people in the auditorium before we will need to go to an overflow. Once the auditorium is full, our ushers will begin directing people up here to the chapel. We'll have an overflow seating area here with a live video feed for you to use. We realize it's not the same as being in the auditorium, but we should only need to do this for a couple of weeks. And also, I want to mention that this would probably be the place if you are a parent with some wiggly children and you're concerned about them being quiet during the services, since we're not going to be having childcare offered. The nursery is not going to be open at this time. This may be the place that you want to come and sit if you're concerned about your children being disruptive. Overall, though, we're encouraging parents to sit together with their children. We're not that concerned about disruptions in the service, but if you have some concern about that and you don't want to be in the auditorium, you could come up here. We'll have chairs spaced out through the chapel, and you'll be able to watch the service and participate in the service with the other folks who are in that area. When you're exiting after the service, and we'll talk about how we're going to be dismissed in a little bit, but when you're exiting, you're going to go down the steps or the ramp here, and you're going to go directly out the security door, which is in the corner of the building, into the corner driveway there, or the circle driveway, rather than over to the main entrance, and that will help us to maintain the social distancing as folks are exiting the building. So as you're exiting the building, obviously those who are in the main auditorium will be exiting through this door. As we mentioned, those in the chapel will be exiting through the security door in the corner of the old foyer. We are going to be dismissing by rows, and we're going to be doing that in a very orderly fashion, much like we would do at a wedding, to go through a receiving line. And we'll be dismissing, in this case, from the back to the front. And we're going to be encouraging folks, as you're dismissed, to go immediately outside. If you need to use the restroom for something, that is fine, if you have an emergency, but otherwise we're just asking that you would leave the building quickly. The same would go for while you're seated. Please, we're not going to be walking around visiting with one another necessarily at this point inside, but if you have an emergency, you need to use the restroom, that's fine. But otherwise, we're going to be encouraging people to do all of your visiting outside. So after the service, we'll be dismissing orderly. You go to the outside, do all your visiting outside. Please, parents, keep your children with you at all times. Your children should not be running through the building. They should not be visiting with their friends here in the building. Once they're outside, they can run and play and see one another, that sort of a thing. But we just ask you to be respectful of these things, parents, and help us with your children. We're going to be doing some extra disinfecting of all the high contact surfaces in the building between the services. We will need some help with that, and we'll be sending an email sign up and asking folks to volunteer to help with that. We will not be having children's classes or nursery. However, for those moms who are still nursing babies or need a place to change diapers, the nursery will be unlocked and open, and you can utilize that for those purposes. For those who are not comfortable coming inside yet because of the mask, because you're just not ready to be in an enclosed space with other people, we understand. There's a couple of options. First of all, we're going to be allowing folks to sit under the canopy outside. We'll have some speakers hooked up, Lord willing, by Sunday, so that the sound from the service will go there under the canopy. It will be a little warm on Sunday, but it'll be shaded, and you can sit there and listen into the service. There will also be the possibility, of course, to use the live stream. And if you want to come to the parking lot and live stream the service, you can do that, and then you'd be able to visit with folks after the service. You can also use the radio, as we have been using the last several weeks. It's FM 101.7, and you'll be able to tune in your radio. If you're planning to do that, you may want to park over on the side of the parking lot that is closest to Buckeye Road. because of where the antenna is going to be located. You'll get a better reception over in that area. We will be enacting changes and adapting as we go forward. Once we change to green, we'll start to relax some of these things. Once we get into green for a couple of weeks, we'll begin to relax even more. We're looking forward, for instance, to getting our children's classes started back up again, and these sorts of things. We'll begin relaxing some of the requirements that we're asking of you. And so we just ask you to be patient with us. Most of all, we ask you to be charitable with one another. Lots of people have different opinions about what is happening and how we should be handling this. And even within our church family, we have folks who have very different opinions on these issues. And we ask you to be charitable with one another. We know that love is how we ought to behave towards one another. Let's be patient and kind to one another as we work through this time. And we're just looking forward to getting back to normal and being able to worship together without masks and without any of these precautions in place. But we realize that it's going to be a little while till we get to that place. This has been quite a journey these last few weeks, and we're thankful for the grace of God. We're thankful for what God has done through this time. We'll share some testimonies about that as we get further along. But we appreciate your patience with us. Please pray for us that we'd have wisdom and that God would give us His clarity and His understanding as we navigate these uncertain days and try to do the best thing for our church family. We appreciate your patience with us, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday as we gather together again in our building and begin to worship the Lord here.